what has Excelsior's domain been picking up from eBay? Let's have a look.
Now I have to apologise right out the gate here, because you might have thought this was Monday. It's not. It's Thursday. But yes, these are Star Trek ships. But these are Eaglemoss Star Trek ships. So I don't really view them as toys. So I felt I couldn't put them in my Trek Toys playlist / slot, because that's not sort of the way in which I think of the Eaglemoss models. So these are ones that I picked up very cheaply recently, actually, to fill gaps in my collection. But they're not the ones I actually want to show you tonight, because I've decided that I'm not going to carry on doing sort of individual ship videos, because, you know, Eaglemoss have unfortunately been dead for a few years now. Other people have looked at all their models in the past and the rather excellent magazines that they've released. So I'm just going to sort of quietly keep on building my collection of, you know, the ships of the past, and to sort of do that in the background whilst I'm gathering other things. But you can on occasion get these very, very reasonably, even with the magazines, and the magazines are really well put together. So, you know, if you're a fan of Star Trek, then I would certainly recommend these to you, because a lot of them are very, very well done. You know, these are various examples from the sublime to the ridiculous, and I would not hold it against you if you did not recognise all of them, because I don't really recognise several of them, but they do nevertheless fill a gap in my collection. Interestingly, ones like these are actually from the original series, but we didn't actually always see those original series ships in any level of detail whatsoever. So sometimes what Eaglemoss have done is take the reimagined version of them from the digitized, digitally enhanced and so on version of the original series, and used those instead. So they've just sort of, you know, they filled in some blanks in that sense. But what I do want to look at with you tonight are a few of the even larger models that Eaglemoss did, which in fact aren't of ships, which kind of sounds like a contradiction in terms for a sort of, you know, a Starships collection. But I think you'll see when you have a look at them that they have their own merits, and one in particular I view as being particularly iconic of the Star Trek films. And when I was able to get that for, you know, quite a sensible price, I thought, yeah, I can't not get that, because I have no idea where I'm going to put it, but it's a real sort of centerpiece kind of display piece, you know. So let's get rid of these, and we'll have a look at the really big boys. Now, I think this very much falls under the category of what I bought to fill in a gap that would otherwise have been present. I think I recognise it. I think it's from a Star Trek Next Generation episode where there was some sort of alien creature involved that was on this little sort of relay station, and all it was there to do was to sort of take subspace communication and kind of boost the signal and bounce it on again. So it wasn't a terribly exciting thing. I'm not even sure why the Enterprise went to have a look at it in the first place. But let's have a look at this one, and it'll give you a taste. This is actually the smallest, I think, of the ones that I'm going to look at. And immediately you'll see that this has a little teeny tiny magazine in the front of it. And this is not unusual. This will be what Eaglemoss termed a special issue. So even with these sort of station kind of releases, they will still give you a magazine, but it's not the same format as the really sort of big monthly magazines that came out with the ships. They give you a sort of like a sort of half-sized version, but it will give you all the sort of the normal specs and so on that you would expect to see from a sort of typical Eaglemoss magazine. So I'm not proposing to sort of read it, but if I just give you a quick sort of flick through, you'll see. So it's a subspace relay, function communications, location IPI sector, Active 2369, Command Lieutenant Keith Rusher. So relay stations are a vital part of Starfleet's faster than light communications network. So as you see, you know, it's lots of sort of CGI graphics, images from the episode that it appears in. I think we only ever saw one of these. So it obviously just has a bit of a sort of a skeleton crew manning it to keep it going. But they probably they look as if they designed this specifically for this particular episode. It actually looks a bit wrecked in those images, but and apparently 47 is a number we see a lot in Star Trek. Okay. Okay, defended by 47 sentry pods. Reached level 47 in the game. Okay. Interesting. Not something I was aware of as being a thing, but apparently it is. So yeah, so there you go. Just a little magazine to give you a little bit of background about what it is that you've just collected, basically. So, as is usual with these Eaglemoss boxes, they come packaged in polystyrene because these sorts of models in particular, being sort of vertical in nature, can be quite breaky. So they really need this sort of level of protection in transit in order to be preserved safely, which happily it looks like this one has been. So always have quite unique stands, these guys, as well, of course, because they've got to sort of sit in something, on something, to prop themselves up now. And but I think very carefully about this before I actually sort of prop this up, because if I take it out of the box in the incorrect way, I'm probably going to break it. And this is a problem with a lot of these stations, because I suppose the irony is they were designed for a 0G environment, not for a 1G environment, which means that they often have very, very thin parts for what would otherwise you would think would be a fairly sort of substantial structure in space. Which means that when they get reduced in size through models, they get super, super breaky if you're not very, very careful. I'm having to sort of just, you know, check my own grip on this before I do anything with it. So as you can see, just looking at that, it's fairly terrifying, because you can see that it's got these incredibly tiny little bits of plastic to it here. If I zoom in on this part here, see those little bits that, you know, they're seriously expecting those to survive any sort of impact whatsoever, and they're really not going to. It's a little bit like the bird of prey's disruptors on the wings. They are the thinnest pieces of plastic. Much of this is metal, because a lot of the Eaglemoss stuff was die cast in large part, so there is quite a nice weight to these models always. But they do have some incredibly fragile little pieces to them, and this, children, is why they are not toys, because if you play with them like toys, you will smash them up. And I have on occasion purely accidentally smashed them up, because they do not survive contact with hard surfaces from a height very well at all. So you can imagine that the trepidation that Eaglemoss collectors have when they're moving their collections around from point A to point B. You have to do it when you are fully with it, because otherwise tragedy will ensue. So it's got all the sort of classic detailing. I mean, I just noticed now, just, you know, looking, if you zoom in there, you may or may not be able to make that out yourself, but hopefully on a 4K shot you will. There's a little teeny tiny Federation symbol there, and it is tiny, it's teeny tiny, but it is there, and this is the sort of quality level that you expect from Eaglemoss models. I'd be interested to know if Master Replicas are sort of maintaining that now that they've got the the licenses and they're sort of carrying on with this, but I have resisted the urge to pick their stuff up, because it's just never ending. You know, you have to draw a line under these things at some point, and as I've mentioned in the past, you know, I draw the line in terms of Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, that sort of era, really. That is as late as I go with my collecting of these things, otherwise it just wouldn't stop. So I will very gingerly put that somewhere vaguely safe and then carry on. So What else have I got? Well, this one is equally obscure, and to my knowledge, I think it has only appeared in the grand total of one episode. And this is the Tiger Core Orbital Station. Now, this will probably mean absolutely nothing to you. When I saw it on eBay, I was I thought, I think I know where I've seen this before. And I think I'm right, and I'm going to throw up a screenshot whilst I try and unbox this in a sensible fashion. I'm trying to think where it's actually held. That's along there. And you see, you know, it's interesting. Some people really try and profit off the back of these things with these sort of the larger box items, but equally, this thing has absolutely zero sort of fan appeal particularly. So this sort of one you can get very cheaply, but it doesn't mean it isn't a great model. So this is what we're looking at, because I've not got it in the best mode for a picture. But this is quite unusual. This is a Klingon space station. You don't tend to see many alien space stations, Deep Space Nine notwithstanding, I know. But nonetheless, you definitely don't see many Klingon facilities in the show as a whole. So this intrigued me as a concept. And I did remember the episode it came from, and I remember that it was set on a station. Because loosely speaking, now I'm going to get the name of the episode wrong now. I think it was called Age of Apocalypse, something like that. And basically, Cisco et al. Infiltrate this station, disguised as Klingons, in order to unmask a changeling, with the help of Dukat's stolen bird of prey. So it's quite a sort of action-packed episode, and you're not quite sure if Dukat's going to sort of do the dirty on them, because he was never the most trustworthy individual at the best of times. But it's just interesting because, of course, we're in CGI mode now. So they could do stuff like this quite easily. And there we go, another sort of little special issue magazine included in there. But it's nice that you can still get these sealed. So we can have a quick bounce through here, and I'll just check that episode reference as well. So it just calls it Tiger Core Orbital Station. Type orbital platform. Location Tiger Core planetoid, although it looks like a very big planet in the episode. Quadrant Beta, which is where the Klingon Empire lived. Active 24th century. A network of orbital stations helped to protect the Klingon planetoid of Tiger Core in the 2370s. So that's similar to the screenshot I just showed you, actually. Yeah, so they go there under the pretense of, so this is one of several actually, they go there under the pretense of getting sort of commendations basically, but they're actually hunting for a changeling. I won't tell you who it is, because that would be spoilers, wouldn't it? But you can see, you know, it's all sort of all CGI driven here. Although, interestingly, no, that's a physical model. Oh, the Tiger Core Orbital Station was built by an unsung hero of the art department, Anthony Frederickson, also known as the King of Kludge. Well, that's fascinating. So it actually had a proper shooting model. Well, fair dues to them. Fair dues to them. I've unjustly accused them of using CGI there. So presumably the CGI we just looked at was purely an Eaglemoss reworking of it, and probably what they used to perhaps sort of generate the model themselves. I don't know. Presumably we're just looking at oh, I see, they're doing instances where the heroes were transformed to look like someone from another alien race. That's the theme there. Okay, interesting. Quick flick through. So let's have a look at this one, because this one should be, I think it's going to be a little bit chunkier than the relay station was, but again, really good, solid, huge chunk of polystyrene coming up off it. As you can see, it's just like an iceberg of polystyrene. Oof, now then. Yeah, this is going to be a fun one to get out. I wonder how it sits actually. Where's it? The stand's there. Okay. Look at that. So it's got a sort of, this one's got a bit of a sort of crown stand going on. They're always see-through, just to give that sort of impression that they're sort of floating a little bit. But one of the fun things about the Eaglemoss collection is that if there was an earthquake, right, not only might it also damage all the ships, of course, but if it knocked all the stands around, it would then be a complete nightmare trying to figure out which stand belongs to which base, belongs to which ship. Because the bases helpfully identify what they're displaying, so that's super useful. But most of these connectors at the end here are fairly universal, so you've got no chance knowing what's supposed to sit in there just from looking at that. So if you lose the original stand, then you are kind of in trouble, because they are, they're not standard. They are frequently very, very bespoke, in fact, to the particular ship they're designed to hold. So it is a real problem if those things get separated from one another. Now, I've no idea if I've actually put that in the right alignment, but let's just try and extract this from the box. Could be easier said than done. Just trying to think which angle to do it from, and whether or not the sort of docking ports are actually going to be strong enough to allow me to take it out by one. Actually, that's a lot lighter than I thought it was going to be, so that was quite easy. Now, this is interesting. This is one of those Eaglemoss models where I do sort of question it slightly. That is light as a feather. I seriously question whether or not there is any metal content in that whatsoever. Now, maybe they thought it would be too heavy if they made it solid metal in any place, but that does not feel great in the hand at all. Every now and again, you do get one from Eaglemoss where you sort of think, really Eaglemoss? Because, good Lord, is that supposed to go in there? Oh, I see, okay, so those are, yeah, that's going to nestle in there. But again, with the teeny tiny protrusions, it's just nightmarishly scary to get into its stand. I don't even know if I've got it in the right orientation. I probably haven't actually. Let me rethink that. Let me put it in this way. But can you see? That's just insane. Those are all teeny tiny, and you've got to get those through the base without plinging any of them. It's like playing Kaplunk, and then you just got to sort of nestle it in there and hope that nothing untoward happens. Now, don't get me wrong, plastic or not, that's still pretty cool. It's just interesting because it's got a lot of detail to it. And I like the sort of the coloration of it. I'm actually surprised it's not green because most Klingon ships tend to be green, and I guess that's just a choice in terms of having a paint scheme applied for the ships, whereas this one is just more utilitarian. It is what it is. It's a station, so it doesn't need to have the green tinge to it. But that is basically what you're getting. So, to my mind, this could come from any given science fiction setting. If you just sort of resprayed it, if indeed there are any Klingon symbols on it, which there might be. Yes, there are some Klingon symbols on it. There's one underneath a top section there. I don't know if you'll be able to make that out. Yeah, I think you can. So there is a degree of origin being identified there by use of the symbols, but generally speaking, that's quite generic looking to my mind. So I think, it's almost like original series Battlestar Galactica. It's got that sort of industrial, grungy sort of imperfect feel to it. You can tell it's Klingon because it's just it's all about bare utility. It's not trying to look elegant. It is what it is. It does what it says on the tin. So really interesting because, as I say, to that point in time, I would hesitate to say that we'd ever seen a Klingon space station, ever. So actually, it does set a sort of design precedent for Klingon orbital structures, essentially. So it's quite interesting in that sense, to my mind, anyway. So that's that one. Not actually. I mean, it's got more to it than the relay station. Yes. Lots of nice docking ports and so on, but actually, size-wise, it's still not massive. Now, I have, of course, done my level best to save the best till last, for obvious reasons, and I'm really hoping it's in one piece, because it's not even been out of its bag. And here we have it. And of course, if you are at all into your Star Trek, you will recognise that. You will recognise that. This is space stock. It's probably primarily Earth space stock as well. Although I suspect, it's probably a space stock from any given major Federation planet. But it's a big, big station. And there's going to be little teeny tiny doors in the top here, which are Enterprise Constitution class size and Excelsior sized, assuming this is the one from the movie era, of course. We do see stations like this in the Next Generation as well, on occasion. Very occasionally, the Enterprise D does dock up with these stations, but I can only assume that they're bigger, because the doors would have to be much, much bigger than they used to be in order to accommodate a Galaxy class saucer section. But anyway, that's a separate debate. But when I saw this, I just thought, oh, do you know what? Yeah, that's iconic to my mind, because it's one of those really, really impressive first-time structures that we see in the original series films. So I think we first see this. Now let me think. I would think in, I was going to say Star Trek 2. But actually, I don't think they leave. Do they leave from this station in Star Trek 2? Yeah, I think they do, because I think when he orders Savick to go to Impulse inside the station to leave it. So I think they did establish this design in The Wrath of Khan. So when the cadets go out on their training mission, this is where they depart from. And then in the third movie, we see the Enterprise leave from here with the Excelsior in pursuit. So we see a bit more of it in that film as well. So let's get into this. Yeah, this says Earth Space Stock. So this is a special issue, but it's a big old special issue. And I imagine this is probably the sort of packaging they originally came in. This was only $24.99 when it was originally released. To be fair, I'm not sure I didn't pay massively over the odds for it this time round. The magazine is rather unhelpfully wrapped around the box. Now, in fairness, that may just be how it came. There's a slight gap there, so I will take advantage of that to get into it. Yeah, that's irritating, but it's not, because of the nature of this magazine though. The magazine itself is quite shiny. Now this is a full-size magazine that I'm getting here as well, so actually I've got to go further back to show you the full thing. But that's a really nice image on the front there as well, which gives you a nice sort of indication of sort of top-down scale of it as well. So that's a nice piece of illustration. So it's still classed as a special issue because it's not part of the normal run. But it's a larger format magazine compared to the other ones that I've shown you tonight. Now, interestingly, once this is actually out of the box, I'm not sure it's going to be as big as I thought it was going to be. It's probably a case of a bit of an optical illusion, in the sense that the bag makes the overall box look bigger. So I'm not actually sure this is going to be towering above the relay station, but that just highlights another classic problem that Eaglemoss had, which of course was scale. They couldn't reliably scale for Toffee, because all of the ships are different sizes, and yet they've got to get them all into the same sort of box. Basically, that was a very practical problem that they had in trying to do this range. So nothing scales with anything else. There is no standard scale for Eaglemoss. It is just what it is. So, operated by Starfleet, class space dock type, built to 2250. Yeah, so this is an early one. Earth orbit, height over 3 miles. So it's over 3 miles tall, if tall is a thing in space. So high above Earth, the sight of space dock's opening doors marked the start and end of many Starfleet missions. Indeed. And there are the doors there. In fact, there are several doors. So it looks like it's got sort of, kind of compass heading doors there. Maybe they can even open other elements of it, I don't know. and you know, you'd see sort of lots of ancillary vessels, you know, zipping about. This one's a funny one. So the office complex orbiting Earth in Star Trek: The Motion Picture left, and the USS Enterprise as it prepares to leave dry dock in the same film below. That is the regular space station turned upside down from Star Trek 2. Funny, isn't it? Until I actually read one of these magazines, I don't think I'd clocked that, but it is. That's what they did. They just flipped that and then used it in Star Trek 2 and hoped you wouldn't notice. And quite frankly, I didn't. But as you can see, you know, these are all the sort of design sketches for the concept. And I think that Star Trek Strange New Worlds has done a slightly different version of the space dock as well. So they've got, I think, what do they call it? Is it called Starbase 1 or something? Or it's been a while since I watched that episode, but you know, that is a thing as well. It looks like a big jellyfish, doesn't it? Like that. ILM technicians work on neon lighting inside the full-size space dock exterior model prior to the addition of etched decorative panels. Yeah, it's fascinating how big these things had to be for them to be able to sort of film them convincingly. And this is the sort of classic interior shot there. But just look at the size of that. They're actually they're sat in it. It's crazy when you think how big they actually had to build these things to actually allow them to film the quite large ship models, of course, as well inside it. So actually, this is a really nice issue to have. And if I put enough weight on it, I'll probably be able to sort of flatten it out. Yeah, that's very cool. That's the scene from Star Trek 3 there that I was talking about with the Enterprise trying to evade Excelsior there. There's actually some really funny moments in those films when they're trying to get out of space dock. It's quite entertaining. Oh, and they put that sort of 1970s study model for an unused Enterprise design into. I didn't know that. That's cool. That was nestling in the background. It's one of those sort of, you know, Easter egg kind of things that obviously they put some sort of subtle ships into the background of the space dock scenes. That's cool. Right, so let's get this out and let's have a look at it and let's see how big or not it actually is. Interestingly, that's not sealed, which is curious given that the bag was at least largely sealed. But perhaps they felt that because it was coming in a bag they didn't need to seal it inside as well. I'm making a right hash of this, but I'm trying not to wreck the box. I'm fairly confident there isn't any sellotape there. It just requires a little bit of oomph to get underneath it. Okay. There we go. So again, great big chunk of polystyrene. Oof. All right, that may not have been the best angle to. Oh no, it's actually resting on the side of the box. Interestingly, it's probably just dropped down there as I've removed it. Let's take that out first. I think its stand is actually behind it in the box, so I'm going to have to. I'm going to have to take the circular spinnable Starbase very carefully out and make sure it doesn't roll off the table before I can actually construct the stand to place it on. And again, you can see this sort of classic sort of antennae already coming off the top of it, which you've got to be careful not to break. Now, it's not quite as light as the Klingon station, which is good, but it's still quite light. This is an approach they often take. They go for this sort of ring stand for some of these larger ones as well. Now then, let's see if I can get this in a sort of happy fashion. Yeah, so the box says, collector's model, not designed or intended for play by children under 14 years of age, or even children over 14 years of age. Don't play with it, kids, because you will break it. Now then, so saying, don't break it. Okay. Those with 3D vision challenges should not attempt this, basically, because it could be problematic for you. I don't know why I'm whispering, because that doesn't really help concentration, but there you go. So there she is. And she is rather lovely. She's got a few little polystyrene bits hanging on to her, but apart from that, yeah, so check that out. But again, from the sense of scale point of view, I was hoping for something probably a little bit bigger, but the detailing on it is nice, so you do get that sort of, you know, you do feel like you're seeing a lot of detail, which suggests that it's a much larger object than it actually sort of is. There's a lot of fine sort of detail going on there, and you've got that sort of detail up the top there on the antennae as well, which again, very, very breaky inevitably, but you just have to be extremely careful with it. So if I just pan down here, I'll give you the sort of the full impression. Refocus there so you can see the detailing. So I mean, the detailing on these is really, really good. They go to a lot of trouble to put in a little bit of sort of coloration where it needs it, and some line work there as well, just to bring out a bit more detail. But yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, looking at it, what I think I'll do actually, I'll just bring the camera down a little bit, because I think that's a better angle to look at it from rather than from above. And the stands are not that tall ultimately. So they're just enough to give them a bit of clearance from the base, and that's about it really. So as you can see, you know, it's a really sort of nice kind of shape. It's a very sort of straightforward kind of shape when you think about it. But of course, Starfleet stations didn't spin. They didn't use the O'Neill station principles. They just have artificial gravity, so they don't have to do anything clever with you know, sort of rotational gravity production. They just produce gravity, so they can just look as they need to look for aesthetics basically. But you can imagine that the sort of the volume inside there is quite huge. But I remember that in Star Trek Picard we see a massive sort of upgraded version of one of these, which they've obviously had to do to accommodate much larger starship sizes subsequent to this sort of era's Starbase. But I thought that was a nice touch though, because it was still had a lot of it was still sort of calling back to this original design, which I thought was nice. So as I say, I think this is a really nice centerpiece if you're into that sort of generation of the original series movies and so on, because it's very, very iconic, and it turns up in virtually all of the movies in some way, shape or form, you know. Because this is also effectively Earth's last line of defense against an invading attack force, because as we see in Picard, you know, it can take a hell of a lot of punishment and also dole it out. But you know, ultimately it's kind of weird because it is a static emplacement, so you could just go to the other side of the planet and invade that way, but I guess the thinking is you've got to take this out because it's actually projecting a planetary shield. So unless you take this out, the planet's actually very hard to bombard from space. I think that's part of the thinking behind these sort of really, really big star bases. So yeah, very happy to have that in the collection, and I've been meaning to get it out for quite a while now. But as I say, I couldn't quite justify to myself putting it into Trek toys, because they ain't toys. They need a lot more respect than a child would give a toy, I'm afraid, because they are incredibly delicate. In many respects, you know, some of them you'll get away with it, others not so much, and this is one of the not so much one. But these probably aren't ones that you see so much of, because obviously they're not the famous ships. But for me, it's about the universe building. You know, you've got to have a place for ships to park up and get repaired and refueled and transfer crew easily, and you know, all of that. So this just makes perfect sense to me. So I'll just bring in the others by way of comparison, because as you can see, ironically, as much as I was sort of laughing to myself about the relay station, actually the relay station is nearly the identical height of the Starbase, which is a bit daft really. You know, you would think that they'd have done anything else with the with space dock to try and make it that little bit more impressive looking. Size-wise, but I like what they've done with it, because it's not ridiculously out of keeping with the ships, you know, sort of the XL size ships that they did either. So I do kind of understand that. So I just thought that's quite a nice display piece, that I think, having 3 of them together like that. I've no idea where I am actually going to put them on a permanent basis, but just for the time being, just for now, I think that's quite pleasing to the eye. You've just got to be very, very careful about how you move them around. So, with that note of caution, I will leave you there, and I'll see you again before long. Cheers for now.